The woman stood frozen at the edge of the yacht deck, her emerald dress catching the Miami afternoon sun, while Darius leaned against the chrome railing with that knowing smile of his. She'd just asked the question that changed everything between them, not about money, not about his empire, not even about the 3 men who'd been following her for the past week. No, she asked something far more dangerous. Darius, she said, her voice barely above a whisper, if I really stay this time, will you tell me the truth about why my father warned me about you before he died? The ocean breeze carried her words across the deck, and for the first time in 30 years of commanding rooms and closing billion-dollar deals, Big Boss Darius felt his carefully constructed world tilt on its axis. Because the answer to her question would either save her life or destroy the only real thing he'd felt in decades. You know what? If you're enjoying this level of luxury, drama, and romance, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. We've got stories that'll keep you on the edge of your seat. I promise you that. More Big Boss Darius coming your way. 3 weeks earlier, Darius Kincaid Monroe had been sitting in his penthouse overlooking Biscayne Bay, sipping 30-year-old scotch and reviewing acquisition papers for his newest hotel chain. At 62, he'd built an empire that stretched from real estate to tech investments. From Miami to Manhattan, his white suit was pressed to perfection, his fedora resting on the marble counter beside him, and his world was exactly as he liked it, controlled, luxurious, and predictable. Then Scarlett Hayes walked into Russo's, the upscale Italian restaurant he owned in Coral Gables, and everything shifted. She wasn't trying to catch anyone's attention, that's what caught his. While other women in the restaurant wore their ambition like jewelry, Scarlett sat alone at a corner table, reading a worn paperback and occasionally glancing out at the afternoon sun filtering through the palm trees. She had auburn hair that fell past her shoulders, intelligent green eyes, and the kind of natural elegance that didn't need announcement. She was maybe 35, dressed in a simple cream blouse and tailored pants, and she looked like she belonged in a world far removed from the one Darius inhabited. He shouldn't have approached her. He had a dinner meeting in an hour, 3 phone calls to return, and a situation in New York that needed his attention. But something about the way she smiled at the waiter, the way she seemed completely content in her own company, pulled him across that restaurant floor. "Excuse me," he said, his voice smooth as aged bourbon. "I don't usually do this, but I own this place, and I've never seen someone look so peaceful in the middle of Miami's chaos. What's your secret?" She looked up, and those green eyes studied him with an intensity that made him feel exposed in a way he hadn't experienced in years. "Your secret?" she said calmly. "Is that you're Big Boss Darius? You own half of Miami, and you're probably wondering why a woman eating alone on a Tuesday afternoon doesn't seem impressed by any of that." He laughed, genuinely surprised. "You know who I am. Everyone knows who you are, Mr. Monroe." She closed her book. "My father used to mention your name, usually not in the kindest terms." "And who was your father?" "Richard Hayes. He was a federal prosecutor. He died 2 years ago." The name hit Darius like a cold wave. Richard Hayes had been the man who'd investigated him 15 years back, digging into alleged connections between Darius's business empire and certain influential families in Miami. The investigation had gone nowhere because there was nothing illegal to find, but Hayes had never believed Darius was clean. He'd died convinced that Darius was hiding something dangerous. "I'm sorry for your loss," Darius said carefully. "Your father was a dedicated man." "He was obsessed," Scarlett corrected. "Especially with you. Right up until the end." She paused, studying Darius's face. "But I'm not my father, Mr. Monroe. I form my own opinions." That's how it started. Not with grand gestures or calculated seduction, but with honest conversation over pasta and wine that stretched from afternoon into early evening. Scarlett was an art conservator, recently moved to Miami from Boston to work with the Perez Art Museum. She was smart, funny, and refreshingly uninterested in Darius's wealth. She asked about his childhood in Atlanta, his mother's cooking, His first business venture, selling refurbished cars at 19. By the time the sun set over Coral Gables, Darius knew he was in trouble. The good kind of trouble. Over the next 2 weeks, they fell into an easy rhythm. He'd pick her up from the museum in one of his cars, never the Rolls or the Bentley, something understated like the Mercedes, and they'd drive along Ocean Drive, talking about art and history and the absurdity of Miami traffic. She introduced him to hidden galleries in Wynwood. He showed her the best Cuban coffee spots that tourists never found. They had dinner at Hole in the Wall, places where nobody knew his name, and he realized how much he'd missed feeling normal. Scarlett made him laugh. She challenged his opinions. She wasn't afraid to call him out when he got too comfortable in his own certainty. And slowly, carefully, he felt something he hadn't allowed himself to feel in decades: vulnerability. But there were shadows. Darius noticed things. A black SUV that appeared too often when they were together. A man in a coffee shop who seemed too interested in their conversation. Phone calls that Scarlett would take privately, her face tight with worry when she returned. "Everything okay?" he'd ask. "Just family stuff," she'd say. But her smile didn't quite reach her eyes. Darius had built his empire on reading people, on understanding the space between what they said and what they meant. Scarlett was hiding something, and that scared him, because the last time someone close to him had kept secrets, it had ended with betrayal that cost him millions and nearly destroyed his reputation. The situation came to a head on a bright Thursday afternoon. Darius had surprised Scarlett with a spontaneous trip on his yacht, a sleek, 150-foot vessel named Legacy that he kept docked in Miami Beach. The plan was simple: sail out into the Atlantic, have lunch prepared by his private chef, and maybe, finally, tell her how deeply he'd fallen for her. They were an hour out from shore, the Miami skyline shimmering in the distance, when Scarlett's phone rang. She stepped away to answer it, and Darius noticed her shoulders tense. When she came back, her face was pale. "I need to tell you something," she said. "I'm listening. Those men you've noticed following us? They're not random. They're connected to my father's old cases. Before he died, he was investigating a trafficking ring connected to some of Miami's most powerful families. He never finished. He died in what everyone called a car accident. But I don't believe that. I think he was killed." Darius felt his blood run cold. Scarlett, and the people he was investigating? They think he left evidence with me. Documents, recordings, something that could destroy them. They've been following me for months. I came to Miami because I thought I could disappear, start over. But they found me. Her voice cracked. And then I met you, and I thought maybe, just maybe, I could have something good. But I'm putting you in danger, Darius. Just by being near you. He crossed the deck and took her hands. "Look at me. Why didn't you tell me this before?" "Because my father spent 15 years convinced you were part of the problem. He died believing you were connected to these families, that your empire was built on dirty money and dangerous alliances. How could I trust you when his last words to me were, 'Stay away from Darius Monroe. He's not what he seems'?" There it was. The truth that had been hanging between them since that first day in the restaurant. Darius released her hands and walked to the railing. The ocean stretched endlessly before him, blue and infinite. When he finally spoke, his voice carried the weight of decades. "Your father was right about one thing. I'm not what I seem." He turned to face her. "But he was wrong about everything else. The families he was investigating? I've been feeding information to the FBI about them for 20 years. Not because I was ever part of their world, but because I've spent my entire adult life making sure they never touch what I've built." Scarlett stared at him. "What?" "My mother cleaned houses for one of those families when I was a kid. I saw things no child should see. I watched them operate with impunity, destroying lives, trafficking women, corrupting everything they touched. When I made my first million, I made a choice. I'd build something so legitimate, so clean, that I'd have the power to help take them down from the inside. I couldn't do it publicly, they'd kill me and everyone I loved. but I could do it quietly. He pulled off his fedora, running his hand across his head. Your father investigated me because I was close to these families geographically, socially, in business circles, but he never found anything because there was nothing to find. I own hotels and restaurants. I invest in technology and real estate. Every dollar is legitimate, every transaction above board. But I also know things. I've been at their parties, heard their conversations, seen their operations, and I've been passing that information to federal prosecutors for 2 decades. My father never knew. He couldn't know. The families have people everywhere, police, courts, even federal agencies. The only way to survive was to be invisible in plain sight, to be the successful businessman who seemed adjacent to their world, but never part of it. Darius stepped closer. Your father's investigation into me? I helped facilitate it, made sure he had access to my legitimate records, because I knew he'd find nothing. I wanted him to clear me publicly so I could keep working behind the scenes. Scarlett sank into one of the deck chairs. And these men following me? They're connected to the Castellano family. Michael Castellano runs their operation now. He's paranoid, sloppy, desperate. If your father had evidence against them, Castellano will do anything to get it. Darius pulled out his phone. But here's what he doesn't know. I've been documenting his operations for 6 months. I have enough evidence to put him away for life. And I have the connections to make sure you're protected. Why are you telling me this? Darius knelt beside her chair, his white suit stark against the blue ocean backdrop. Because 3 weeks ago, I was alone. Rich, powerful, and completely alone. Then you walked into my restaurant, and for the first time in decades, I remembered what it felt like to want something more than success. I want you, Scarlett, but I won't lie to you. And I won't put you in danger without you knowing exactly who I am and what I'm offering. She touched his face, her fingers trembling. What are you offering? Protection. Truth. A life where we don't have to hide. He smiled. And all the luxury and adventure you can handle. But first, we have to finish what your father started. We take down the Castellanos. We make sure you're safe. Then we figure out what this is between us. And if I say yes, then tonight, you sleep in my arms on this yacht, and tomorrow, we change everything. Scarlett looked out at the ocean, at the endless blue horizon, at the life she'd been running from, and the one being offered to her. When she looked back at Darius, her eyes were clear. My father was wrong about you, she said. But he was right about one thing. You're not what you seem. You're better. The next 72 hours moved like a carefully orchestrated symphony. Darius made calls to contacts he'd cultivated over decades, federal agents he trusted, prosecutors who owed him favors, judges who knew his reputation for integrity. He presented evidence against the Castellano family financial records, recorded conversations, testimony from protected witnesses, everything he'd been gathering for months, now deployed with surgical precision. Scarlett provided her father's research, files he'd kept in a storage unit that she'd never known existed until she'd started going through his belongings. Together, their evidence was irrefutable. Michael Castellano was arrested on a sunny Friday morning at his waterfront estate. The operation was swift, professional, and absolute. By noon, the news was everywhere. By evening, federal prosecutors were announcing one of the largest organized crime busts in Miami's history. Through it all, Darius kept Scarlett close. They stayed on the yacht for 3 days, surrounded by security, while the legal machinery ground forward. They talked about everything: her father's obsession, Darius's lonely decades of secret cooperation, the strange path that had brought them together. You could have told me earlier, she said one evening as they watched the sunset from the deck. I could have, Darius admitted, but I've learned that trust isn't given, it's earned. I needed you to decide who I was based on what you saw, not what I told you. And what do you see when you look at me? He pulled her close, his white suit catching the orange glow of twilight. I see the only woman brave enough to call me on my nonsense, smart enough to challenge me, and kind enough to look past my father's prejudice to find the truth. He kissed her forehead. I see home, Scarlett. For the first time in my life, I see home. 2 weeks later, with the Castellano organization dismantled and Scarlett officially cleared of any danger, Darius threw a party at his penthouse. Not the usual business affairs with artificial smiles and calculated conversations, but a real celebration. Scarlett's friends from the museum, Darius's closest confidants, a mix of art and business and genuine warmth. Near midnight, Scarlett found him on the balcony, looking out at the city he'd protected for decades from the shadows. "Penny for your thoughts?" she asked. "I'm thinking about your father," Darius said, "about how he spent years convinced I was the villain, and I'm wondering if he'd approve of us now." Scarlett leaned against the railing beside him. He'd approve of the truth. He dedicated his life to it, even when it cost him everything. And the truth is, you're exactly the kind of man he would have wanted me to be, with someone who uses power to protect, not exploit. Someone who stayed honest even when corruption would have been easier. She took his hand. He would have liked you, Darius. It might have taken him a while to admit it, but he would have liked you. "And what about you?" Darius asked. "Do you like me?" She laughed. "Like is a weak word for what I feel. You saved my life. You finished my father's work. You showed me that luxury and integrity aren't mutually exclusive." She turned to face him fully. "You asked me where I'd sleep on the yacht. I think it's time I give you a real answer. I sleep wherever you are, Darius. Today, tomorrow, for as long as you'll have me." He pulled her into his arms, and the city lights sparkled around them like a promise. At 62, Darius Kincaid Monroe had everything he'd ever worked for: wealth, respect, influence, and now, something he'd stopped believing he deserved: love. Real, complicated, hard-won love. "You know what the best part is?" he whispered into her hair. "What's that?" "We're just getting started." Below them, Miami hummed with life. Above them, stars emerged in the clear night sky, and between them, in that moment, everything was exactly as it should be. The story could have ended there, with romance and resolution and the perfect bow. But life, as Darius had learned, rarely wrapped up that neatly. 3 months later, as he and Scarlett were planning a trip to the Amalfi Coast, he received a call from a federal prosecutor. "Mr. Monroe, we have a situation. Maria Castellano, Michael's wife, wants to talk, but she'll only talk to you." Darius met Maria at a secure facility outside Miami. She was a striking woman in her 40s, exhausted from months of legal battles and public humiliation. When she looked at Darius, her eyes held neither anger nor resentment, just resignation. "You destroyed my husband," she said simply. "Your husband destroyed himself," Darius replied. "I just helped speed the process. He was going to kill you, you know, after your girlfriend. He had it all planned out." She smiled without humor. "But you were always 3 steps ahead. My father used to talk about you. He said you were the one man in Miami who couldn't be bought or scared." He was right. "Why did you want to see me?" Maria slid a folder across the table. "Because I have children, 2 daughters, and I don't want them growing up thinking their father's world was normal. I want them to see that there's another way." She opened the folder, revealing financial documents. "These are accounts my husband kept hidden, money from operations even his lieutenants didn't know about. I want you to use it for something good. A foundation, scholarships, something that helps kids like yours who see the wrong path and need a way out." Darius studied the woman across from him. In another life, another world, she might have been someone different. "You're willing to testify?" "I've already started. Full cooperation. They're offering me protection, a new life, somewhere quiet." She stood to leave. "Tell your girlfriend something for me. Tell her that her father was a good man who made my family's life hell, and I hated him for years. But now I understand. He was trying to save people like me, people who couldn't save themselves." The money Maria provided funded the Hayes Monroe Foundation. established in Richard Hayes's name with Scarlett as its director. It supported children from disadvantaged neighborhoods in Atlanta, Miami, and New York, providing education, mentorship, and paths away from the criminal enterprises that had scarred those cities for generations. At the Foundation's opening gala, held at the Perez Art Museum with Miami's elite in attendance, Darius stood at the podium in his signature white suit and fedora. Scarlett sat in the front row, radiant in a silver gown, her eyes bright with pride. "My mother used to tell me that the measure of a man isn't what he takes from the world, but what he gives back," Darius began. "For too long, I gave back in shadows, in secrets, in ways nobody could see. But the woman sitting right there," he pointed to Scarlett, "taught me that truth doesn't have to hide, that doing good is better when it's done in daylight." He paused, letting the room settle. This foundation honors a man who dedicated his life to justice, even when it cost him everything. Richard Hayes never knew that I was on his side. He died believing I was part of the problem. But his daughter saw past that. She took a chance on a 62-year-old man who'd forgotten how to trust anyone except himself. And because of her, we're standing here today, turning blood money into hope. The applause was thunderous. But Darius only cared about one person's reaction. Scarlett was crying, smiling, and when their eyes met across the crowded room, he saw everything he needed to know. Later that night, back at the penthouse, with the city stretched out below them and jazz playing softly in the background, Scarlett stood in Darius's arms as they swayed to the music. "You know what I realized today?" she said. "What's that, beautiful? My father spent his life looking for villains. He was so focused on finding the bad guys that he missed the good ones standing right in front of him." She looked up at Darius. "I almost made the same mistake. Almost let his prejudice blind me to what you really were. And what am I really?" she smiled. "You're the man who turned pain into power, who used wealth for protection instead of domination, who built an empire so clean that it could tear down the corrupt ones." She kissed him softly. "You're a hero who never needed recognition. And I'm the luckiest woman alive because I get to see the man behind the legend." Darius held her tighter, feeling the weight of decades lifting from his shoulders. "I told you on the yacht that you'd sleep in my arms. But I didn't tell you the rest." "What's the rest?" "That I'd spend every day making sure you never regretted it. That I'd use everything I've built to keep you safe, make you happy, and show you what real love looks like when it's patient enough to wait 62 years to arrive." "That's a big promise, Big Boss." He laughed, the sound rich and genuine. "I've never been afraid of big promises, just afraid of making them to the wrong person. But you, Scarlett Hayes, you're the right person. The only person." They danced until the music faded, until the city lights dimmed, until morning light started touching the edges of the horizon. And somewhere in that space, between night and day, between past and future, Darius Kincaid Monroe finally understood what he'd been building toward his entire life. Not an empire. Not wealth or power or influence. Just this. This moment. This woman. This love. Everything else was just the journey. So here's the thing, folks. If you made it this far, you know this isn't just another romance story. This is about second chances, about looking past prejudice to find truth, about good men who fight battles nobody sees. Big Boss Darius has more stories to tell, more adventures to share. Hit that subscribe button, drop a comment telling me what you thought, and let me know what you want to see next. Maybe Darius in Paris, or handling a situation in New York? You tell me. Until next time, remember, real luxury isn't what you own, it's who you become. And real love? Real love is worth every second of the wait.